So if I am walking down the street and someone runs up to me and starts slapping their head and shouting ups and downs, one of two things is going to happen. The first is I shall cross my arms and think to myself, this person is taking the mick out of me. Or two, I shall realise I'm being ripped off. And in that instance, I may go to some kind of managerial power and say, please, will you ban them from doing this? Because if I don't have my gimmicks, what am I? Just some no-haired fool. And the reason I put this to you, my friends, is because not only does it happen in real life, but it also happens in professional wrestling. So here are indeed 10 wrestlers who were banned from using their own move. Like the video, share the video, subscribe, let's go. Number 10, Andrade. If you have been watching Andrade for a long time, all the way back when he was in Mexico, he went to NXT, and now a little bit in AEW, but not much, you will remember that he's a fan of the spinning back elbow. And some people like it so much, they compare it to Kenny Omega's V-trigger. That's high praise. People have noticed ever since he has been in All Elite Wrestling though, he hasn't really gone to that well very much. And as he revealed on Twitter recently, because he's not allowed. And the main reason for this is because somebody else in the promotion also enjoys doing this maneuver, and it's their finisher. And that person's name is Chris Jericho, and we're talking about the Judas effect. And you really do have to give some plaudits to Jericho here, because he protected that thing like a mother. I think only John Moxley has kicked out of it to date. So this is just one of those situations where you look at one back elbow, and you look at the other back elbow, and realize like this one is the ending maneuver of one of your biggest stars. So you have to go to the other guy who isn't using it in that way and say, I'm really sorry, it's gotta go. It doesn't mean that it doesn't suck, but at least it does make sense on paper. And I'm sure backstage, everybody is happy as Larry. Number 9, Kenta. Another person who came out on social media recently and started talking about their finishing move. You may remember that Kenta, now of New Japan fame, had a long old run in NXT, which didn't really work out how he would have liked. I swear that man was cursed. But taking all those injuries he did suffer and sticking them over there, something else he had to go through was the fact that he wasn't allowed to do the go to sleep, even though Kenta is the guy who invented the go to sleep. The whole reason for this is because the man who made it famous in WWE was known as CM Punk. When it comes to punkin' the World Wrestling Entertainment Federation thingamajig, well, they don't really get on, so management went, listen, we don't want anyone going CM Punk, so you ain't allowed to do it. Kenta did seem properly cut up about this, as you would do. That basically allowed him to become the super duper star he did, and then he gets to the quote unquote big leagues, and they try and flush him down the toilet. Number 8, CM Punk. Here is the irony with this one. It already happened back in the day with CM Punk. Because if you did follow his career in the indie scene or watch him in Ring of Honor, you knew he was a big fan of the Pepsi Plunge, which is when he would get on the top rope, hook his opponent's arms, and then face plant them. And what does that sound like? You bet your ass is a top rope pedigree. So you can just imagine as soon as Triple H saw that, he was like, yeah, that's got to be nixed. Because it was just a cooler variation of the maneuver. Of course it was. Anytime you go to the top rope and a commentator can say, that's an avalanche something, fans go all dog-eyed like, oh my God, I can't believe it. So that was that, and I do believe the first time we saw it since Ring of Honor was when he busted it out in AEW. That was like 15, 16, 17 years. Wrestling is quite the trip. Number 7, The Undertaker and Kane. Now admittedly this one didn't last very long when it came to The Undertaker and Kane, but there was a point when the WWE decided no more pile drivers. We are sick and tired of wrestlers being dropped on their head, so no one is allowed to do this anymore, otherwise Vince McMahon's going to find you and waggle his finger in your face. Now this makes perfect sense in the world because we know about brain damage and concussion, and don't forget it was a pile driver that put Stone Cold Steve Austin on the shelf, so both the dead man and his brother had to come up with something different, which is why The Undertaker was doing the last ride for so long, and while Kane went back to the choke slam. And this was fine and all, and after a while the Big Red Machine basically never did do a tombstone. Eventually someone did go, look, we got to let The Undertaker do it. Mark Calloway is very safe, so he was indeed allowed to do it again. But if you're like some kind of nerdy historian and you go through the archives, you will find this little window. It is the dead man who was never going to last. Number 6, Seth Rollins. Another one that's quite hard to argue, although he did get it back now. For a while there, Seth Rollins switched from the curb stomp to the pedigree because Vince McMahon was sat in his office and somebody must have said curb stomp, and he thought to himself, wait a minute, what if a child hears this and then stomps another one of their kids onto a curb? I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. Cancel this. Now, once again, I can't stand here and say, oh, Vince McMahon is so stupid. Because when I was a child, I was being powerbombed and choke slammed and rock bottomed through a table, and that one isn't a joke. So there's every chance this could have happened. So why he eventually did a 180 and said, look, Seth, you can do it, but now we must just call it the stomp, as if that's any different, I don't know. I mean, like, I can stomp with my foot right now, and if I do that onto someone else, it is gonna hurt. But now you know, and you ain't gonna forget. Number 5, Seth Rollins again. So we all remember at Night of Champions 2015 when we had the incredible match between Seth Rollins and Sting. Still can't believe that went down. When Rollins picked up the Stinger and gave him a buckle bomb, something happened to Sting's neck, and at one point it looked like he was retired for good. Now, this wasn't fun, nice, or enjoyable. In fact, it actually sucked, and it did make WWE decide to ban the buckle bomb altogether. And again, I can kind of understand that. You pick someone up, put them in your face, and then just hurl them backwards. That's always got the potential to go bad. I don't know if these two things tie together, but the buckle bomb was reinstated kind of around the same time that Sting made his debut for AEW. Now, I may have just made that up. I may have my maths wrong, but Seth Rollins is back to doing it all the time again. And given that Sting was one of the few that did get injured, maybe everyone just decided that actually it's safe. But it's not safe, because all wrestling is kind of dangerous, so if you decide to do this, remember to protect your opponent. Number 4, Randy Orton. Do you remember back in the day when Randy Orton was a super duper mega asshole? He wouldn't just do the RKO to beat people, he would put them on their hands and knees, go over all the way to the other side of the ring, sprint, and just punt them in the head. I believe it was suggested by Arn Anderson to Orton in around about 2007. And this was a genius move because it just looked so disgusting and made Randy come across like a psychopath. After he had given one to Vince McMahon though, after Vince had said to him, hey pal, you better kick me in the head as hard as you possibly can, and McMahon got a concussion, everyone decided that maybe this was a little bit too crazy and they should roll it back a bit, which they did. But like other moves on this list, one day it just magically came back. Now recently it has gone away again because this new version was nowhere near as impactful. The camera angle would switch, meaning Randy wasn't actually kicking his opponent in the face. And he talked about this in 2020 saying, you know what, it doesn't really click nowadays. So I suppose we can say goodbye to this one, which probably is for the best. A lot of people got hurt. Number 3, AJ Styles. I can only presume that Vince McMahon had heard on the grapevine that the Styles clash injures people, so before he had even seen it, he went to AJ and said, I'm very sorry, Mr. Styles, you're not allowed to use that in my company. This was absolutely baffling because Michelle McCool had been using that move in WWE and nobody seemed to care, and that's why I truly do think it just comes down to the name. Because when Chris Jericho was in a program with AJ Styles, he sat down with Vince and without saying what it was, he described the move, and Vince was all like, oh yeah, well, that sounds great, pal, you could definitely do that. So in their match, they did the Styles Clash, and then Vince McMahon was like, oh, it's a Styles Clash, and then he realized the Styles Clash was okay, and now everybody's allowed to do the Styles Clash. So it will absolutely make your brain go loopy, especially because you're telling AJ Styles you can't do the Styles Clash. That's like telling me that I can't be a Miller. I mean, that one doesn't tie in at all, but it's still stupid. Number 2, Samoa Joe. Ever since Samoa Joe arrived in AEW, he has been doing the Muscle Buster again, but I ain't gonna go against the reason why WWE told him to stop doing it, because on one horrible day, he gave it to Tyson Kidd, and Tyson Kidd almost died. I'm not putting any blame on anyone, I just think it's one of the risks when it comes to wrestling, but just go and find an interview with Tyson where he talked about this. Everybody was amazed that he wasn't paralyzed, not at least that he was still able to walk. There are no hard feelings between the two either, and actually if you go through Samoa Joe's record when it comes to this move, not that many people have got hurt, but it just means I'm going to reiterate what I have already said. Don't walk into a wrestling ring and even do a power slam or a body slam and think, oh man, nobody can get hurt on that. Yes, they can. You always have to be safe, and you always have to be on your game. Number 1, the Hurricane. Shane Helms' Vertebreaker was an incredible move. Hopefully we have a little picture on the screen now so you can remember it, but you would have to be the most hardened person in the world to see it and not go, because when you witness the impact, It looked terrifying. Now, I'm not sure if anybody did get injured by this or whatever, but what probably happened is that the powers that be kept seeing it, and every single time they're like, oh my god, he just crushed that guy on his neck. Maybe we should stop doing this move, and somebody rubber stamped it. Not that it made any kind of a difference though, because Helms was an absolutely incredibly smart wrestler, and he was like, all right, well, I don't need moves. I'll just become the Hurricane. I'll be one of the most entertaining people on the roster. I'll get over, I'll get a bunch of cheers, and I'll earn a lot of money, and then I shall just ride off into the sunset. Which is what he did do, and he can still lay claim to coming up with that, or at least I presume he did, but either way, go and YouTube it right now. I hope you don't fall on the floor. Now, for the other wrestlers that were banned from using their own moves, make sure you let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Then head over to whatculture.com where you can read yourself some articles. Make sure you come follow us on social media at Simon316 and What Culture WWE. We have a lot of other videos, a lot of them. Please give them a watch. My name is Simon What Culture. Thank you for joining me as always. And if you've been banned from using your own move, you must be a wrestler. So thanks for watching. Goodbye.